Howdy. What's the holidays without a few antics from the giant yellow fry-cooked sponge? Well, probably not that much different, but I like SpongeBob. And it's interesting to see how SpongeBob handles the different seasons and special events. From getting fired to Christmas.
Don't be a jerk. It's Christmas.
To being teleported to a Dungeons & Dragons fantasy world. Of course, some of these episodes are considerably worse than others. Anyway, let's check out the top 5 best and worst SpongeBob specials. For the 5th worst, SpongeBob's Last Stand. I've actually heard some people say this episode was initially meant to be the series finale, but I personally couldn't find anything confirming that from the staff. Maybe it was just a misinterpretation because of the name. This is definitely a case of us getting a huge chunk of time filler nothing content, like SpongeBob and Patrick's jellyfishing song, which is probably the most blasé typical SpongeBob song I've ever heard. I mean, it's literally the words jellyfishing song repeated over and over again, and it gets grating very quickly. The episode's basically about SpongeBob and Patrick trying to stop Plankton from building a superhighway that would both destroy the jellyfish fields and put the Krusty Krab out of business. And it's just as cliche as it sounds. I was trying to figure out why I felt so impatient and uncomfortable watching this episode. Then I realized it perfectly captures the most boring, unpleasant parts of my old activism days in cartoon form. The sign hanging, handing out flyers to strangers, being harassed by security.
Alright, you two, you're under arrest.
What for?
Unlicensed use of a sitar.
Coming up with terrible jingles that no one's going to remember. And the public's not so happy response to all this. Yeah, I've always respected the resilience of people who can keep doing this stuff long term. But the episode captures perfectly how exhausting my memories of those activism days are. Even Give Jellyfish Fields a Chance is among the show's most dull songs I've heard. It's a parody of Give Peace a Chance that feels severely underwritten. At least in Give Peace a Chance, the words that rhyme all tie into John Lennon's message. But here, they're just a series of random words that happen to rhyme.
Bubble, net, and guggle, tool, booth, rotten tooth, freeway plan, Peace a Chance.
Who could possibly figure that out?
I feel like if they had planned on ending the show after this episode, Steven Hilberg would have made sure the episode was, special. Instead of being a generic environmental episode with nothing at all special about it. Even if he'd left by this point, I think he'd come back just to make the finale right. I mean, this amazing man worked on the show while he had ALS, just because he wanted to get his creation back on track. Although it's worth noting, Season 7 ran into its own set of problems behind the scenes, and their time frame was a lot shorter. And that's how SpongeBob's Last Stand feels, like the writers were rushed for time.
Stop the madness!
And for the 5th best, it's a SpongeBob Christmas. Here we see a truly satisfying plot for a Christmas special. Watching SpongeBob and his evil replica destroy Christmas. What could be better? The style of this one really jumps out and hits me. It's very easy to get claymation looking weird or uncomfortable, but they strike a good balance of colors here. In fact, the stop motion was directed by Screen Novelties, who directed the stop motion of Adult Swim's Robot Chicken. So there's a ton of comedy in the animation right there. The story this time is Plankton laces his fruitcake with jerktonium.
Jerktonium.
Which turns the entire town into jerks.
Everyone can get behind a mouthful of Christmas time.
But what's most amusing about this is that SpongeBob is the one destroying Christmas. He joyously spreads the jerktonium to Bikini Bottom far and wide. It turns out SpongeBob's too pure to be affected by the jerktonium, so we get something even better. An evil SpongeBob.
SpongeBob, give me back my door.
Yeah, they have as much fun with this character as they should. They're pretty creative with his antics, and the fight at the end has a perfect mixture of action and comedy. I honestly appreciate a Christmas special where they tone down the schmaltz a bit and give us some misfortune as well. Even Patrick's busy setting a tiger trap for Santa. I mean, that's pushing the envelope for SpongeBob in itself.
I think it's pretty obvious, SpongeBob. I'm eating fruitcake and setting a tiger trap for Santa!
There's something interesting about seeing everyone in Bikini Bottom turned into Scrooges, Sandy included.
Why should I help all them jerks?
And by the end, even an unfestive sourpuss like me was feeling more in the Christmas spirit. And props to what I consider one of the best songs the show's made.
Don't be a jerk. It's Christmas. It's Christmas.
The song's lyrics give it an extra push as well. They're very blunt and direct, but the music is so catchy and upbeat that it kind of invests me in what they're saying. Just try to be pleasant company for the holidays and appreciate the people who want to celebrate it with you. A sentiment that the show's done before, but it still feels relevant to me. Overall, I think It's a SpongeBob Christmas has just the right tone balance, not being too over the top, yet still helping me feel a little festive. And for the fourth worst, Atlantis SquarePantis. There's nothing worse from a SpongeBob special than an adventure that goes nowhere. I would say the first 5 minutes sum up well just how unfocused this special was.
How's it look, buddy? Ready for the old scrapbook?
More like the scrap heap. They never come out right.
It starts with SpongeBob and Patrick trying to take pictures of their bubble art, to SpongeBob singing about the delicate nature of bubbles, to SpongeBob blowing a bubble so sturdy that it lifts them off the ground, thus starting their adventure. Hang on, wasn't Spongy just telling me like 1 minute ago that bubbles are delicate? I guess just blow them big enough so they don't pop as easily? What? See, this episode does that a lot. It sets limits for itself only to break them very shortly after. It's another case where the special feels like it's forcibly making itself longer with out-of-place, pointless songs, to barely stretch it out to 35 minutes. Tom Kenny stuck in traffic, I can deal with. Drawn-out bubble songs, not so much. Everything in it feels like it's on cruise control. The characters aren't even really given anything special to do in Atlantis. I mean, we know they can do this right, because Dunces and Dragons was a big medieval special, and every character was used to further the plot. Here, Atlantis feels like a setup and nothing more. It's only used to give them a way to shoehorn in typical jokes they could use in any episode. The writing on the songs also feels a bit lazier on this one, and there's little drive from the voices behind them.
I'll get these germs and make them pay with some good old-fashioned karate. Hi-ya!
I mean, I know the SpongeBob voice actors aren't exactly known for being spectacular singers, but there's usually a lot of passion behind their voices, and often that's been enough to carry the songs. Here, it's like they're winging it because they're only given the shallowest description of how their character feels.
Pick up a brush, a pencil, or pen. If you don't like this one, paint it again.
Hell, they even got David Bowie from Labyrinth, and they didn't give him a song. David Bowie! How could you not give him a song? I mean, he did freaking dance magic. He's probably the only actor who can make a song memorable on Drive alone while dancing with a bunch of puppets.
Dance, magic dance, magic dance, magic dance.
But I do admit, the episode still has a couple of fun moments.
These Atlanteans leave a room full of the most advanced weaponry unguarded? No wonder they got lost.
Overall, Atlantis SquarePantis has its moments, but it feels like it forced 10 minutes of content into a 30-minute episode. And the fourth best SpongeBob special is Dunces and Dragons. This special doesn't even try to conceal the craziness, and it's simply a blast from start to finish. It's not trying to be particularly emotional or nuanced. It's just a straightforward SpongeBob and Patrick fun episode. It's about SpongeBob and Patrick being teleported to medieval times, somehow, and coming across the ancestors of other characters, where it's revealed they're actually the Chosen Ones, and they're sent on a quest to save the kingdom.
Like in the prophecy.
Yeah, it's every bit as basically put together as it sounds, but because we're seeing these characters we know with such unusual variations, it's actually really interesting. It's never really explained how SpongeBob and Patrick just teleport there, but that's not really the main pull of the story. It's built more around the cliches of medieval times, and it works well here because the episode takes advantage of all the materials medieval times gives them.
Dost thou talketh to me?
Good one, Squidward.
Dost thou talketh to me?
And every now and then, they'll even rehash some classic quotes.
Silence, heathen!
I get the point. You've made your point.
And because the rest of the Bikini Bottom citizens are technically different characters, they're given very fitting changes to their personalities and traits. Squidly, who is, hilariously enough, the town fool, is almost as much of a fool as SpongeBob and Patrick at times. And I found it a pretty clever change that results in some standout humor.
The king is bad, the king's to blame. He hangs his kingly hair in shame. La, 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 la.
The songs aren't exactly good, but they're not really supposed to be. They're much more just comedy-centered short ditties, but some are still pretty memorable.
The evil wizard's dragon is here. See the townsfolk scream with fear. See the townsfolk try to run. I can tell this won't be fun.
Dunces and Dragons makes every moment of its 20 minutes pop. Even the voice actors are obviously having a ton of fun with their character deviations. Giant dragon jellyfish, swords, Squidward as a jester, and Sandy as a knight. I really enjoy all these fantasy versions of Bikini Bottom characters, and I definitely recommend this special.
Wow, the boys back home will never believe this.
I'm right here and I don't believe it.
And the third worst SpongeBob special is The Legends of Bikini Bottom Anthology series. Maybe this is cheating a bit, because technically this is 6 episodes. I mean, technically, I'd say Trench Billies is the worst. But hey, the whole anthology felt like a real bore to me. It's basically just a set of famous urban legends that are told so blandly that I immediately forgot about them after viewing them. None stand out, and none of that entertaining. In fact, when I first saw these episodes, I had no idea they were specials, which is never the sign of a particularly good special. Sponge Cano focuses on volcano sacrifices. Sacrificing Squidward, in fact, since sacrificing the most miserable person in Bikini Bottom will apparently stop the suddenly active volcano. The results are, unfortunately, a pretty mindless, predictable episode. And it makes me think that this season's writers had a tough time understanding what made Squidward funny.
SpongeBob, I hate my job, and I live in a dead-end town with neighbors I can't stand. I'm the most miserable person in Bikini Bottom.
While the show tries to set up Squidward as somewhat deserving of his misery, to me, it just felt like a lazy way to make him unlikable and justify the rest of the episode. Then there's Welcome to the Bikini Bottom Triangle. Well, I think you can probably guess what it's spoofing. And I think this one has a little more substance than Sponge Cano, and I think the idea of the Bermuda Triangle actually being a girl's closet, well, that's a pretty funny idea. But it's certainly not an episode I've watched more than once. I mean, I can only hear dialogue like this for so long.
I love this Mirror Girls, but it is so 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, self-aware or not, that is supremely annoying. The monster that came to Bikini Bottom has a similar effect. It's boring, but I can at least admire it for not even trying to hide that it's boring.
Officer, arrest me right now because I'm about to throw a horrible tantrum that no one around here wants to see.
And the main drain is the sheer definition of basic. This is probably one of those ones you've seen before as a kid, but long forgotten. I know I did. It's Mr. Krabs telling SpongeBob and Patrick a story about a drain that they shouldn't seek out. So they go and try and seek it out. That's really it. They're constantly repeating that they apparently need to find this drain. It ends up playing out kind of like a warning to kids about being, I guess, nosy? Or curious, maybe? I don't know, it's so vague that I think you can implant any lesson you learned as a kid onto it. Then there's the curse of the hex. Well, I think this imagery really speaks for itself.
I see you're hungry.
And on top of that, it's just a mess of an episode. Unimportant things like the build-up of the hex are just dragged out, and moments that could be fun, like a fight with a giant eel, feel quickly rushed through. And finally, the notorious Trench Billies. I mean, even if you disregard that horrible imagery, it's still just a boring redneck episode. We've all seen these stereotypes before, and I don't think they're any funnier than they were 20 years ago. And unlike all the other episodes, which seem to have some kind of urban legend type inspiration to them, this one seems to have no legendary connection at all. Why did they even make it a Legends of Bikini Bottom episode? And the result is an episode filled with overtold jokes and gross out imagery. Overall, this string of 6 remarkably forgettable episodes just showed a lack of creativity and effort. And for the third best, Friend or foe? Even before this episode, Mr. Krabs and Plankton were always an interesting duo to me. They pretty much had the exact same shtick since the show started, but this episode gave that shtick more depth because we see their backstories, and their interactions feel more meaningful now that I know this story. It turns out originally, Krabs and Plankton were childhood friends who came up with the idea to start restaurants together.
We went back to Stinky's to rub our patty in those kids' greasy faces.
But disagreements led them to starting their bitter rivalry. Honestly, this could have been a regular episode, but unlike the worst specials, this one actually takes advantage of that extra time. It makes their friendship one similar to Spongebob and Patrick's, where the two are virtually inseparable. However, we see how they're treated by other people, which actually adds more weight and even a little tragedy to their friendship ending the way it does.
You're right, Plankton, I'm sorry. Sorry you have to hang out with Rag Boy.
It also highlights their insecurities about themselves, and how these insecurities led them to becoming restaurant owners, which is actually surprisingly realistic and insightful, because honestly, that insecurity is the fire that a lot of small business owners burn to keep things running well, and I got why these insecurities would later drive a wrench between them. What's also interesting here is it doesn't linger on their fight. The majority of the episode shows their friendship and how bonded the two were, and uses the fight more as an inspiration for the second half of the episode. Here, Krabs and Plankton are giving conflicting stories, and it's perfectly structured. Every time a story's gone as far as it can go with one section, it cuts back, and a new section starts up with a similar, though slightly different tone. The first and second half actually feel like two different episodes. The first half is all about exploring their friendship and backstories, and the second half is what caused their friendship to end. But they're brought together well here. I mean, backstory episodes are pretty rare for this show, seeing as SpongeBob isn't exactly known for following much continuity. But when we do get that backstory here, it feels honest, insightful, and suitable. Friend or Foe is an enriching SpongeBob special that I think's worth a look.
Doesn't this warm your heart, Karen?
I suppose it would if I had one.
And for the second worst SpongeBob special, SpongeBob You're Fired, or known by its other name, Filler the Special. I mean, as we've seen, a lot of these worst specials have filler, but this episode's a special that's nothing but filler. It just never gets going. While Atlantis Square Pantis may have some filler, it at least tries to give you an adventure. It's a pretty boring adventure, but it's still trying. But You're Fired is just an episode that goes nowhere, very slowly. And within that filler, we get a pretty nasty message that demonizes the unemployed and goes severely out of character for SpongeBob.
Hey, Squidward, look at me. I'm unemployed.
I think I'd call the first half basically A Day Without Tears, where it's mostly just centered on SpongeBob crying, and the second half is virtually the same as the job hunting in Model Sponge, because it's all about SpongeBob suddenly believing he's unable to do anything but make patties, despite him showing throughout the series that he has many other talents and interests. Jellyfish hunting maybe? Pet handling? Karate? Polite customer service? Like really polite customer service. Hell, singing? Unlike Friend or Foe, which feels like two separate episodes fused together in a coherent way, here you can just tell there's no real effort. Normally, even in the worst SpongeBob specials, I can normally find some moments I enjoy, but in this one, there's barely anything I like. Bar maybe this moment. It's kinda touching.
Patrick, what's wrong?
Oh, hey, SpongeBob. I heard you crying. It made me sad.
And Patrick punching his mutant growth. I found that kind of funny. And as I mentioned in the worst SpongeBob episodes, my other big problem is how out of character it is for SpongeBob. For one, they send the horrible wrong message to young people that people are apparently worthless without a job, as well as the fact that apparently SpongeBob completely defined his identity by the fact that he was a fry cook, when we know he'd normally also define himself by his friendly attitude, his friends, and his hobbies like jellyfish hunting. Overall, SpongeBob You're Fired feels like a publicity stunt special that is desperate to grab people's attention with no substance. And for the second best, have you seen this Snail? This is probably the most emotionally packed special of them all. and I think for many people, it can be pretty relatable. It's all about capturing the atmosphere and mood of two characters whose relationship is damaged. SpongeBob and Gary's relationship has always been a decent, man's best friend kind. There's been a few bumps in the road here and there, but mostly it's been pretty nice. But this episode really captures their relationship like no other. It's about SpongeBob accidentally driving Gary away after he forgets to feed him. And the episode cuts back and forth between SpongeBob trying to find his pet and Gary trying to find a new owner, or toughing it out in the streets. The things Gary runs into are a nice blend of creative, while still feeling pretty accurate to what being a stray might feel like. I mean, I suspect a pet would struggle to figure out who's a danger and who's actually helpful, and this episode makes good humor out of it. Like with these tough-looking street snails.
Guess he didn't like nachos.
It's also made very clear what an emotional struggle SpongeBob is going through over losing Gary. All throughout the episode, SpongeBob really does look miserable, and you can just feel how lost he is without his compadre. But it doesn't feel like they're using cheap emotional manipulation to make this work either. The emotional situation here feels natural, because the situation feels real. It doesn't need to hammer anything in, and it instead focuses on how lost the two are without the other. Gary physically and SpongeBob emotionally.
If only I could hear you meow one last time. Meow. Yeah, like that.
And it's all topped off by what is actually my friend Jem's absolute favorite song in the entire show, and definitely one of mine too.
More than a pet, you're my best friend, and forgive me for making you wanna roam.
Although Sweet Victory is phenomenal, it's nice that Gary Come Home is actually an original, and it's a surprisingly heart-wrenching song for SpongeBob. Even though I'm personally not a huge pet person, even I can feel the acutely strong emotions in this episode, and I can recognize just how deep a bond the two have. Every second of this episode flows together perfectly, and every scene feels like it goes on just as long as it needs to. Have You Seen This, Snail feels like a particularly special to me.
So, did you hear any of that, or do I have to repeat myself? Meow. Okay, good.
And before we get to the number ones, let's go through some quick honorable and dishonorable mentions. Legend of Bikini Bottom and Big Birthday Blowout. I decided to rope these two in together because while both of them are certainly among the best, I've already talked about them in best and worst modern SpongeBob episodes. Birthday Blowout was super high energy, plus its skit with the show's voice actors is incredibly surreal and funny. Legend of Bikini Bottom? Well, it's visually phenomenal and super atmospheric. It's probably some of the most creative visuals we've got in the series so far. I mean, that ghost pirate cart scene is just out of this world. Hello, Bikini Bottom. I really dig this special. It's a fine musical, and it really showcases how great the duo of Squidward and SpongeBob can be when the two find common ground. It's about the two getting recruited by a music producer and touring Bikini Bottom, only for things to constantly go wrong. And it works in its musical numbers creatively too. It's a fun, albeit simple adventure, and it shows SpongeBob and Squidward in a very different light, as both feel truly connected by music throughout the episode. And it ends on a powerhouse duet by the two. This one just narrowly missed the list for me, but it's still a great special from beginning to end. And as for the dishonorable mentions, Who Bob What Pants? Another special that's weakened by that stretched out regular episode feeling. The episode follows virtually no path, and everything about it feels so jumpy, overblown, and just plain forgettable. Just nothing feels like it works. Everyone snapping at SpongeBob feels overblown and unnecessary, and it's just a poor attempt to start the episode. SpongeBob losing his mind really doesn't play too much of a role either, since nothing really changes about SpongeBob's personality. It's just a special that doesn't feel like a special. The characters SpongeBob comes across aren't particularly interesting either, and SpongeBob becoming the mayor is just literally thrown in. And I think the only real memorable thing here is the severely overcompensating gross-out joke.
Is there something wrong with me?
And that shot right there is a visual representation of the whole dang episode. One big unkempt mess. The Sponge Who Could Fly, also known as the SpongeBob Lost episode. This isn't exactly an abysmal episode. I mean, it does still have a lot of pre-movie charm to it.
What? No, I certainly do not live in a birdcage. Who is this? Joe Mama.
But it has a lot of moments I just find plain stupid. It's not that memorable, but by that I mean the actual Sponge Who Could Fly episode. Because Patchy's segments that lead up to the episode I actually found pretty funny. But he's meant to be the filler, not SpongeBob. Probably my favorite moment is Tom Kenny's breakdown as he loses all faith in SpongeBob due to the even more disappointing special he got.
That's it? That's the last episode? That was just a bunch of cheap walk cycles! I'm gonna get rid of all my SpongeBob stuff! All of it! All of it!
Like, he really takes this one to heart, only to realize it wasn't the special and completely regain his faith in the sponge. But that's the thing, Tom Kenny's performance and build-up to the actual episode is far more memorable than the actual SpongeBob episode itself. Anyway, on to the number ones. And the number one worst SpongeBob special is Truth or Square. Behold, an episode that's the equivalent to a slap in the face with a giant wet fish. I mean, this is the sheer definition of an episode that thinks its audience will just enjoy anything just because it's from SpongeBob. And sure, that might be true for some SpongeBob fans, but many viewers, young and old, saw right through this. Truth or Square is just continual, seemingly never-ending sandbagging. I mean, the fact that we've once again got Tom Kenny as Patchy the Pirate helps a little bit.
Well, SpongeBob, for one, will be on the show.
Oh, Tom Kenny, the voice of SpongeBob?
Who?
But he's given such a dragging, humdrum story that even he can't save it. Like, it's basically just him being continually rejected by celebrities to appear on the special. And while I like that it's tongue-in-cheek and self-deprecating, the skits just go nowhere, with very little comedic punchline, with spliced in random SpongeBob clip shows.
Remember all the other times SpongeBob decorated?
And I think the issues of this episode are even more obvious now that we've had SpongeBob's Big Birthday Blowout, which is an anniversary episode that actually knows what made the show last this long, and focuses solely on celebrating that. Truth or Square is just continual advertisement clips for the commercial, as opposed to trying to actually celebrate the show's 10th anniversary.
Don't miss all this and more in the brand new movie, SpongeBob's Truth or Square, coming soon.
See, it's the 11th anniversary of the Krusty Krab, which means it's time for 50 random subpar flashbacks and very slow clips of SpongeBob doing his daily activities. After all, we've got 53 minutes to fill with 5 minutes of actual content, which perhaps means that we shouldn't have made it a special at all, and even slower, annoying music videos purely made to make animation white noise.
Here's a day that couldn't get much better. It is the greatest that's ever been.
By the end, we've gotten a bunch of filler, pointless cameos, and continual segments that don't really amount to anything. Even Legends of Bikini Bottom, which is just 6 unspecial episodes that just blend into the background. At least it tried to have a purpose, to tell a bunch of old famous legends in a kind of SpongeBob way, for the most part. It didn't work, but hey, at least they had an idea. Truth or Square has no idea what it wants to be, and instead just gives us a bunch of spitball ideas. Probably the parts I liked best was Pink's 5 to 10 second scurvy song and, well, Eddie Deason.
We got scurvy, we need some vitamin C. We got scurvy, we need a lemon tree.
And SpongeBob and Sandy's wedding purely for just giving that to the internet. But this is a special that should have been good, because when you have 10 years of unique ideas and memorable moments you can celebrate or get inspiration from, there's no reason to come up with a stupid clip show filled with wasted cameos and a story that goes nowhere. Even if I don't think it's quite among the worst episodes in the series, it's by far the special with the most wasted potential. And I guess in a way, that makes it a truly unique special. And personally, I think the number one best SpongeBob special is Christmas Who? Yep, both Christmas specials are on this list. I personally consider both of them classics, but I think Christmas Who in particular really captures that Xmas spirit in a very honest, simple way, and it gives us what is easily one of the show's most glorious moments. And the Xmas song is one of the most festive songs I've heard. It's so cheesily upbeat and the lyrics are cliche, but it's still structured in a pretty unique way.
on top will complete all the scenery.
The story is basically just SpongeBob trying to get Squidward more into the Xmas spirit. There's a lot of festive cheese here, but I honestly think in this case, it makes the episode better. The characters are like kids discovering what Christmas is for the first time. There's so much wide-eyed wonder, and that's a main focus of the episode. They all have a different interpretation of Xmas and what it's personally about to them.
And everyone pretends to like the fruitcake.
I can't believe anybody would celebrate a holiday where a jolly prowler breaks into your house and leaves gifts.
Yet all of them still come together in a nice way to celebrate it. But the best thing about the special for me, I feel it captures what I consider the true essence of holiday festivities and the best reason to celebrate them. Simply just being kind to your fellow person. And it does that with a really glorious moment. And that moment is Squidward's realization of what the holidays are all about.
The poor little guy. All he wanted was to spread a little joy.
Seeing someone like Squidward, angry, spiteful Squidward, sincerely discovering the thrill and peace he finds in helping others, is easily among his most glorious moments of all time. Sure, it's not as flashy a moment for him as Sweet Victory, but maybe great moments aren't always measured by how many people see them. Squidward secretly makes every single person in Bikini Bottom happy, but no one ever realizes that it was him, not even SpongeBob. It's a true essence of being kind, of altruism, not doing it because you want attention, but because it feels like the right thing to do.
Here you go, Patrick.
Whoa! A wristwatch!
And this message is delivered practically and effectively. To start with, SpongeBob's gift to Squidward, though small, has a lot of meaning and care behind it, and Squidward realizes that. And cheesily enough, that's what awakens his Xmas spirit, and makes him don his red hat and beard. And this here was probably my favorite part of the special, seeing Squidward disguising himself, and truly becoming the hero Bikini Bottom needs, but not the one it deserves.
You'll be in a better jail forever.
But he knows in his heart that he has brought joy to the town for his sacrifice.
You'll be in a better jail forever.
I mean, Squidward spent the whole earlier part of the episode trying to tear down the idea of Santa, and for him to become that in the way he does, that's a pretty remarkable form of writing. And on a more practical side, just seeing Squidward get so caught up in the joy of giving feels like a side of him we almost never see. The minus to this episode was that, well, the Patchy the Pirate skit was among the weakest I'd seen. And honestly, it must take pretty concentrated effort to make Tom Kenny not funny. But the actual episode not only captures that Xmas feeling, but it doesn't feel forceful about it either. Nothing is solved, but for this Xmas, Squidward was the most generous, kind person in Bikini Bottom, and no one can take that away from him.
Thank you, Santa!
Whether best or worst, what I do appreciate about all these SpongeBob specials is they give me a different perspective on the Bikini Bottom world. How does SpongeBob handle different holidays or big moments in his life? Whether he loses his pet or just has a birthday. And if you think I missed a particular special or have any comments yourself, feel free to leave your own thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.